what would be most useful for you in our conversation today?
I would like to find out whether I want to hire you as a tutor to see if I can get my score up. I'm doing great on practice tests, but I'm stuck in the mid 160s on actual tests.
What are your goals?
I mean, I want to get as close to a 180 as I possibly can.
Okay. Do you have a target test date in mind?
I don't right now. I mean, like I said, I've taken a couple already, possibly the June test, probably whatever the next disclosed test is.
Mm-hmm.
But I might skip one, so it might be the next second disclosed test. But I really like the disclosed ones with all the information they give me, at least.
Right. Of course, I understand. And you plan to apply this fall?
I am not sure. Probably not anymore because March 1st is the date for a lot of my schools, so it'll probably end up being next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you say that you're interested in working with me. What would you like to know? I feel like I put out so much information already. I'm more interested in learning about you, but if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Let's see. So I think where I've had the most problems is in logic games, which is kind of surprising because I've got an engineering background. I do pretty well on them. But I hit the actual test and I see a different one than I'm used to. And I guess I have a lot of trouble. Two in particular that have given me trouble. I'm not sure how much we can talk about this one because there was the beer game, the beer and breweries game on the November test. And before that, there was one with, I think it was ambassadors going to India, Ghana, and France.
Right.
That just kind of hit me out of the blue and kind of threw me off.
So let's talk a little bit about how you could prepare for those kinds of weird curveball games. Have you ever focused on curveball games or unique games or rare games in particular?
I'm working through the early games tests, like test 1 through I'm on about 8 now. So I've been doing a little bit of that just because a lot of those are oddballs.
Yeah, that's what you want to do. You want to focus on those so that you're used to being placed in uncomfortable situations where you have to adapt. Obviously, ordering games, grouping games, you're ready for those, but it's the ones that don't neatly fit in a pre-prescribed category that tend to give students trouble. And so LSAT keeps coming up with more and more of those. And they don't necessarily have a lot in common with each other, except for the fact that they are unique. So I think you're doing exactly the right thing. I would just keep working forward through those and then look at different ways to solve them.
And I've looked at about, like the test that I have on paper, and I have some of the other ones that are not, but the tests I have on paper about 40 through 80. And I consider very few of those to be surprising games. I guess they were all when they first got there, but I consider very few of those to be games that are out of the ordinary. But I don't believe that I happened to hit 2 tests where I hit unusual games, so maybe I just got used to them or something.
Yeah, but also they always seem easier in hindsight. The older they are, the more regular they appear. The one that you take on test day, it often seems the most difficult just because it's the real thing. And a lot of the most recent ones, people haven't really had time to absorb them yet, in a sense. You'll go on message boards and you'll see people complain and be up in arms about this particular game or that particular game. But 5 years from now, that will seem normal to everybody. But I've been around and I can tell you that even back in test 57, which was in 2009, the dinosaurs game, test 57 game 3, people were up in arms about that one. That was considered a curveball at the time. Now I don't think people would look at it quite the same way.
I did a practice test at a local university like a few days before the actual test in January. I got -4 on the entire thing.
Wow, that's incredible. Congrats.
So it's not just practice tests that I'm at home and I'm in a comfortable environment, or I don't know, other cases that are not like the actual test environment. I mean, they're not exactly proctored, but there'll be no point in trying to cheat on them, I guess. I don't think you could.
Yeah. Well, fluctuations from exam to exam are totally normal because one particular tough game might throw you and another one doesn't. So that sort of variation is normal. I think that what you're doing in terms of going back to the oldest games is the right approach.
So what other things would you do that would or suggest that would help?
Explanations are good. I wouldn't use them as a crutch. I would puzzle through it on your own first.
Right, of course, yeah.
Maybe do it a couple times.
Okay, that might, yeah, maybe it makes sense. Sometimes I do. I look at it and say, well, I could have done that differently, but maybe if I make a habit of doing it, especially anything that I think could have been faster, try and do it twice and then look at the explanation.
Yeah, and I've got a list of curveball games on my site, starting with prep test 1 all the way up to present. And you're already working through a lot of those, but if you need more, that's a good starting point for you. And just redoing them and seeing that there are different ways to solve them. No one particular way is right, but even though it may seem unfamiliar on the surface, it still contains the same underlying logic in terms of applying rules, solving the questions using previous work. All of that still comes into play.
Yeah, I've been trying to do more of that, and sometimes my writing is a bit too unreadable for going back. So,
well, that's the thing to work on too, because you want it to be clear enough that you could look back at your notes 2 weeks later or a month later and still understand them fully. And during timed conditions, of course, that's really important. You don't want to make some error because of illegible handwriting.
I think I've put too much into trying to fit them all on one page, all 4 logic games on one page, rather than using the space I need.
Well, that's no longer a concern, of course, with the digital LSAT, the scratch paper.
Yes.
You have not unlimited space, but more than enough for most people, I would imagine.
Yeah, I could probably use a page per game and still be fine with everything else.
Oh, I would think so. What about the other sections? Reasoning, reading comp?
I don't have a lot of trouble. I mean, sometimes with the last questions in the LR section, which are intended to be tougher sometimes, I usually maintain about a question per minute pace until about maybe 18 or so. And then I kind of consider that bank time, and then I can use that for the more difficult questions.
That's the right approach. That's certainly one that I would recommend.
RC sometimes gets me time-wise. So I don't know what to say about that.
What's your note-taking like for RC?
Try to summarize the paragraphs, I guess. So I tried in the past to skim the passage, and it didn't seem to work very well. I decided the first time through I have to actually read it, and then I tried to, like I said, summarize the passages, and then I can use that summary as a guide to find information if I need it.
What do your summaries look like? How long are they? How many words?
10 words, maybe, a couple sentences.
That's pretty reasonable. That's certainly the most I would recommend. I would see if you could summarize it further, use fewer words. You don't need full sentences, of course, just a couple of keywords to capture the main idea.
You had a post recently about getting from 160s to 170s, which is exactly what I'm looking to do. Can you expand a little more on some of those points?
Yeah, certainly. So the biggest takeaway from that article is what I call the Socratic review method, which is a technique for reviewing LSAT problems, specifically logical reasoning and reading comprehension. So I find that review is too often the most overlooked part of the LSAT prep process. Reviewing specifically, let's talk about logical reasoning, for example. You want to look at where your misunderstanding is stemming from. Was it the stimulus, the question stem, or the answer choices? If it was the stimulus, what about the stimulus made it confusing? Was it the topic? Was it the way they presented the conclusion and the evidence? Was there filler? Were there confusing indicator words, or were there no indicator words altogether? Do you have to link together conditional statements that are presented out of order? Those are the kinds of things that LSAC can do to ramp up the difficulty level of a logical reasoning question, an argument in particular. Then you might look at the question stem. If they're using unfamiliar wording, maybe that tripped you up. They'll often use unique wording to refer to common question types, but those make it seem like it's a different question type when it's really something quite standard. And then the answer choices in particular, you want to look at what was tempting about the wrong answer choice that made you pick it, and what ultimately makes it wrong. And what was discouraging about the right answer that pushed you away from it, and what ultimately makes it correct. So you're really digging deeper here. I liken this to the Kaizen or Six Sigma approaches, or the 5 whys, where you're really looking to get to the root causes of a problem. What is it about the question that led you down the wrong path initially? Get back to that source. And maybe it has nothing to do with the question itself. Maybe it was just your pacing. Maybe it was your endurance. Maybe you were wrapped up in what came previously. So you really want to get into your game day mindset. Where were you in the moment? What was your thought process like as you were working through the question initially? And keeping a mistake journal to actually articulate this all and write it down is really useful. And of course, you could talk it over with a coach or a tutor or a study buddy, but you want to get out of your own head with this, because it's too easy to say, I get it now, and move on after looking at the correct answer or looking at an explanation.
True. Yeah.
Before we sign off for today, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call?
I guess doing the games more than once right away. That seemed like it would be like too easy. But if you still think it's a good idea, then it's probably worth looking into.
Yeah, give it a shot. Let me know how it goes for you. And in the meantime, I'll send over some more information for you about the coaching.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.